Anticipation.
I know, right? At least she often catches us here in the first couple minutes, so we can. Okay, back to mute.
Great. Round two.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Cocktails with Conductors. I am Peter Wilson, music director of the Richmond Philharmonic Orchestra in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm so happy that you joined us here again for episode 8 of Cocktails with Conductors. And before I go any further, I want to welcome back also to this brand new year. Happy New Year, Will Patty, the assistant conductor of the Richmond Philharmonic. Hello, Will, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you, Peter. Happy New Year to you. Wonderful to be back with everyone. Wonderful for season 8. I'm really excited to be here. Before we go any further, just a quick reminder that you can text RPO, the letters RPO, to 42828 to join the mailing list for events and reminders from the Philharmonic. We'd also like to take a moment to support our longtime supporters from the Virginia Museum of History and Culture for several years of support, the Virginia Department of Veteran Services for several years of support, Town Bank for 15 years of support, and Vogue Flowers for over 30 years of support to the Richmond Philharmonic. Thank you so much for that.
Wow, indeed. Thank you for all of that support. And in addition to Happy New Year, since this is actually our first episode 8 of 2021, it's also February 1st, which means that it is the first day of Black History Month. And that is the big inspiration for our episode today. In fact, I'm so inspired that I have my Black Lives Matter t-shirt, which I got in Washington, D.C. several months ago during the renaming of 16th Street outside the White House. It was pretty exciting to go down there and check that all out. But our episode tonight is entitled Black Lives in Music, and I could not be more excited about our special guest who is with us tonight. I haven't seen this gentleman in over 2 decades, which is really kind of shocking. But he is a trumpet player in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra since 2002. Before that, he was in the Symphony, and before that, he was actually in the United States Marine Band. We were colleagues in the Marine Band together. So he is now the 4th utility trumpet in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Would you please join me in welcoming Mr. Tage Larsen?
Hey, everybody. Pete, Will, Jen.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
Good to see you, Tage. It's so great to have you here. When did I see you last? I mean, have we even bumped into each other since you left the Marine Band? I've just been following your awesome career all of this time.
My awesome career. Oh, don't even say that. I've got the Pete Wilson. Should we do this?
No, I'm doing this right now. We can do that on another episode.
Man, I don't know when the last time was. It's been 25 years?
Yeah. So you were in the Marine Band did you do one enlistment? Did you do 4 years?
I did one enlistment from 95 to 99, Clinton second. And it reminded me of when I was watching the inauguration this year. I mean, it's been a few since I've been there, but just watching the band sit there and do that. And then watching Matt Harding. I don't know if you saw the Matt Deuce trumpet.
Yes, with Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks. To our audience, Matt Harding is the solo cornetist with the Marine Band currently. In fact, I got to serve with him on the promotion board there at the end of my time in, because he became a section commander. So he's had a phenomenal career there.
Yeah.
Did you overlap with him, or did he replace you?
Well, Matt and I overlapped in a couple ways. He was a freshman at Eastman when I was a second-year grad student. Wow. And then I think my last year in the band is when he came in. So I think we had like maybe a few, I might be wrong about that. But anyway, Matt's just been, shout out to Matt Harding. He also came out and played with us in the CSO for a couple weeks, I think, yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
It's a testament to how great that section in the Marine Band is. I mean, Tom Hooten, who's in LA.
Yep.
Matt, all those guys are just like, it's such a strong group. And we were just talking about, before we went live, about how the trumpet section trumpet/cornet section in the band now is just, it's everyone can do everything, right? It's not so much as, so you play trumpet, you play cornet. But back when I joined the band, it was like you were a cornet or you're a trumpet. And if you're a trumpet, that was more like a little bit higher. A cornet, a more elite. Yeah, it was like a special thing. You had to be like sort of let into the club. Like, you had to be
right. And there were only 4 trumpet players back when you were in, and then I can't remember how big the rest of the section is, like 12. I want to say 12 other cornet players. But yeah, you're right. Now that you can audition on trumpet and cornet, but then you get to rotate, which I think it raised morale infinitely.
Wow.
In section, because now they can rotate into the White House Orchestra as well as anything else, and they just have a little more flexibility and freedom. I think it helped improve the section playing too, from what I've learned over the years of. Wow. Hearing people talk on promotion boards and things like that, and just it's the morale, but also the level of playing. The blending is better, right? Because people are moving in different places, not any one set way of doing it, right? So,
right.
Man, we could go on and on for forever.
Right.
We've got to keep to the theme here of cocktails with conductors by starting with a cocktail. So, if you wouldn't mind, Tage, we're going to jump in here and make the last cocktail that we made during 2020, which was during our episode 7 there in our first cycle. And this is called the Immortal Beloved. This was the cocktail that was the signature cocktail that was created for us by Sophia Kim of Long Oven Restaurant in Richmond. And she is just a master. We called her the maestro of mixology, because she came on and she talked about putting tastes together like the way an orchestra puts together, like the strings and the winds and the brass and the percussion. And so she had all these different ingredients that to her was sort of like creating a symphonic cocktail. How cool is that, right?
Really cool. Wow.
So she kind of talked to us about what our different tastes are, what we like. And of course, again, with for example, we're going to use reposado tequila, because that's going to be kind of representing the strings because of the woodiness in the strings, right? And then we've got the drunken brass players, so we've got to have gin.
Oh my gosh.
Did I go there? Did I go there? Okay. And so we have some gin, we have some tequila, we have Barolo Chinato. Yes, Chinato. Okay, which is a type of vermouth. And then we have the sherry here. Got some sherry, and then we have some orange bitters. So we're going to kick this off with, I think Sophia told us to start with the small and work our way up to the big. So I've got my shaker here. I'm going to throw in the 2 dashes of orange bitters. Are you making this with me, Will?
I'm right here along with you. I started just as you started talking about it.
I'm already banging things here. Okay, so I've got the 2 dashes of orange bitters. I'm going to move to the sherry, which is a 1/4 ounce. And ladies and gentlemen, for Christmas, look what I got for Christmas. I got my special jiggers, these Japanese jiggers that I asked for, which have really good labels on them so that I know exactly how much to pour. And this one gets a 1/4 ounce, and there that goes. And then the next thing I do is it's going to be 3/4 ounce of the Kinato.
Great sound effect.
What's that?
Great sound effect with those bottles opening up.
You like that?
Yep, it's really great.
Here we go. I'm going to try to go fast because we want to get back to Tage. We need to hear more stuff. Okay, and let's see. Now we've got the 1 ounce of tequila, reposado tequila. I'm using some, what do I have here? Fortaleza. This is going to go up to the top, all the way to the top. Are you?
I'm ready to stir.
Are you already?
I've really been working on my stirring technique.
You're there already?
Yeah.
How many seconds do we stir it?
Depends on the hand. Depends on how much ice you're using. About 20 seconds.
Hey, didn't she say like 15 seconds? I can't remember. Okay, now here I got my ice.
You mentioned as soon as your fingers start to stick just a little bit to the side.
Taga, you're a martini guy, I understand. Is that right?
No,
Back in the day?
I told you, man, I'm not a martini guy. I'm not. Years
Not
ago,
anymore. You were.
I was. Now I'm old. I
Now
just
you're old. So I think what you told me was you had a margarita with a bunch of 21-year-olds.
That's right.
And because I'm a margarita guy, but somehow you had a margarita that put you down after one. I don't know.
Yeah, because it was at the surprise party for these young kids. Okay, and I'm the old man there. I got to do something. Just, okay, I'll have one. Blah, blah, blah. Around 10 o'clock, Pete, I don't know what happened the rest of the night. Somehow I made it home. I had one. I left my card there.
Did you watch it being made?
That was the problem.
Didn't see it being made. There's no way that one margarita, unless it was like was it a fishbowl margarita?
Could have been. I don't remember.
I remember. Oh my goodness. So this is stirred, not shaken, by the way. So we are not James Bond with this drink. It's not a James Bond drink. Oh, and the last thing, by the way, and I have my glass ready here. These are you'll appreciate this, Taga. These are my Camp David glasses that I got during the Obama administration.
Wow.
That was in your honor, by the way.
Wow.
My Obama glass here for Black History Month.
Wow.
And my dear friend Tage Larsen, and I have a maraschino cherry that we put in here as a garnish.
Absolutely.
Has been soaking in Luxardo maraschino liqueur, and now we're gonna pour it in. You ready? Oh, he's already got it ready. Let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Immortal Beloved.
Cheers.
Cheers, Taga. It's so good to see you, brother.
It's great to see you. Cheers, man. Thank you so much.
Holy cow, that's good. Okay. So, first question. How has life been for you and, in the CSO for that matter, during the pandemic? Talk about that.
Oh my gosh, during the pandemic. Well, we're just finally kind of getting back to doing some playing and recording. We're not doing anything live right now. It's all online content and small groups. I think the largest group that I've been involved with has been maybe 7 people. So they're trying to keep, I think the number's 15 and under. So yeah, we'll just go in like a couple days a week, rehearse and record, and that's been it. I think probably until the summer. Maybe Ravinia will have some stuff going on by then, depending on how the virus is going, how how the levels are, and
the outdoors. So what kinds of pieces are you doing? Are they like more brass ensemble, or are you mixing with strings? I would imagine did the strings come back a little bit earlier because they could mask, or?
Well, it depends on the repertoire. So they've done the Brandenburg Second pieces with brass, Brandenburg Second, but mostly it's been l'Histoire. So small chamber pieces, but we have done a few. Like tomorrow, we're doing some Gabrielli. I think so. I think we've got 12 people tomorrow.
Oh wow!
But I think again, they're trying to keep it under 15.
Now, is Muti conducting these, or are you guys doing them without conductor, or how's that working?
No conductors, yeah, no conductorless. Yeah, so it's been we're making the best of it, trying to get stuff out there, trying to stay relevant in the community, and trying to keep us involved. But it's been a challenge. Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to the fall when we hope everything will just kind of be somewhat back to normal.
Now you're also teaching, right? Is it DePaul?
I taught at DePaul for 12 years up until last year, and then at Roosevelt for like 5 years before that. But then I decided, bastanza, that's enough. I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that ended then before the pandemic began, right?
That's exactly right. I think my last.
Did you miss that, or did you try to start teaching during the pandemic again, like even privately, or?
I do some Zoom stuff every now and then. People will just ask for a lesson. I've done some seminars like with Sphinx Organization, New World, and a few other things here and there with some buddies. But I'm cool not doing that much teaching. Yeah, no, I'm good. It's been nice actually to have the time to spend with my kids, like we were talking about our children, and just to kind of refresh. I didn't play trumpet for like a couple months this past summer, just totally took off. So it was kind of nice to just like kind of recharge, let it go, and actually feel like I'm doing a lot better playing wise.
Oh, wow.
I'm off. Like I started at like step one again, because you're just so used to playing. I mean, it's like you're playing every day, like literally every day of the year, and then 3 or 4 concerts a week for 20 years, going on tour, like you're always playing. You pick up a lot of bad habits, and I realized after some time, it was nice to just do absolutely nothing and come back almost like a beginner again, and just to build up again. Oh, this is what it feels like to articulate really well. This is what it feels like to use your air really well. Just to start becoming super critical about my own playing. So actually, it's been like kind of I wouldn't say a blessing in disguise. I mean, there's a blessing to the COVID, but it's been in a constructive way, positive for me in that sense.
No, I think you're right, and I think that in a very general sense, we all sort of reassess our values in life, and obviously for us as artists in the artistic world in music, you're sort of reassessing what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, right? So I found the same thing. It's like, I mean, I wasn't playing at the degree that you were playing in terms of the number of concerts. I mean, you're dealing with that concept of minor maintenance, right? You don't want to overuse your chops. You're playing so much, you're doing minor maintenance things. And now with COVID, you're back to doing sort of major maintenance. You can kind of build from the bottom up again. Yeah. So talk about to kind of steer this toward our theme of Black Lives in Music. I'd love to hear about how you chose the trumpet, chose to want to do it classically, because I mean, let's face it, there are not a lot of Black folks in the classical world. Sure. I mean, when I think of trumpet and Black Americans, we think of Wynton Marsalis, for example, right? I mean, he's sort of he was the guy that sort of put in some ways put trumpet on the map just as an instrument, regardless of race, with all of his albums that he did early on, right? Yeah. Of course, you probably know about this. Wynton Marsalis actually auditioned for the Marine Band when he was like 17. His dad brought him out and he didn't get it. Thank goodness, right? But I'd love to know who why you chose the trumpet, why you chose classical trumpet, and who inspired you as a young man. And if there are some Black figures in your life that you looked up to, also, I'd love to hear about that.
No, sure, yeah. Well, what really inspired me initially was just my dad loved music in general. He loved classical music, and he had a recording of the Sibelius Second Symphony. He bought a CD, like when CDs first came out, like in early 1980s. One summer, and we were on vacation. He put this CD on. I didn't know what it was. I was 12 years old, 11 years old. No, I was younger than that. 11, 10. He put on the CD, and there was just something about that, Pete, that just was like, when it came to the fanfare at the end, that just struck a chord with me. That just, I can remember the moment, like right now when I heard that, I was like, I have to know what that is. Like that was just so captivating to me. And that sort of lit the spark, like, wow. And the fact I think there was a trumpet theme was like, wow, that was really cool. So then I guess the next year or so in school, I had a chance to pick up the trumpet and start learning trumpet. But I always had the idea of how beautiful that music was. And I knew that somehow I want to participate in that. And then my father had, jazz and classical on all the time in the house. So that sound was just like permeating my existence, and I loved it. Wynton, of course, Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Louis Armstrong, of course, Clifford Brown. So music became like, for me, a focus, like something I really wanted to participate in. I really wanted to learn. I wanted to get better at. But I think more importantly, I wanted to be a member of a group. I love the idea of being in an ensemble. So in high school, I was like in chorus, jazz band, rock band. I had like a reggae band. I was in the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. I was just doing everything I could do. I grew up in Boston, so yeah. But just the idea of just being in a group and doing something really cool and making great music was just so instrumental to me.
What do you think though? If your dad was really genuinely playing all kinds of music, I mean, you mentioned the Sibelius, I get it, but not to focus too much on the race issue, but I mean, it is really extraordinary that you would choose classical music just from a, if we want to call it a stereotypical thing. I mean, what do you think drew you specifically to classical music versus jazz? I mean, I get you wanted to play in ensembles and wanted to play music, and obviously you dabble in jazz as well, right? I mean, your main gig is Chicago, and your main gig is symphonic orchestra music.
Yes.
And you don't need to convince me why that's great, but I'm wondering how you and your development made that decision.
I think it had to do with where I grew up, honestly. Cambridge, Massachusetts.
There you go.
There's such a strong cultural presence there of classical music, of arts in general. Of course, with the Boston Symphony. Cambridge also had its own community orchestra. All these visiting orchestras, being so close to New York. And I really do think that the fact that my father loved classical music a lot and had it on all the time. So Beethoven, Mozart, it was just in the background. I also remember that in my room, part of my room was up in the attic on the third floor. And so my parents stored a lot of stuff up there. And there was a collection of those Time Life classical music records up there. And I didn't have a record player, but the albums were there. And the liner notes were there. And I would read them. And I would just read I just would sit there and oh, what is this? Oh, really cool. Oh, the Age of Enlightenment, blah, 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 this and that. Oh,
that's right.
Bach, remember all that stuff? I couldn't play them, but they were just there. So it was just something about that. And again, growing up in Boston and just culturally how strong it is there. I don't know, just sort of was that whole environment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The environment around you, not just your dad playing the classical music, but yeah, I mean that was a mecca. I mean, with Tanglewood and Bernstein and the whole thing, right? I mean, I can get that. So what you mentioned Miles Davis and Wynton Marsalis. Were there any other figures that inspired you along the way?
Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, all the great singers, just Sarah Vaughan. My God, I remember one of my instructors in high school, the drum teacher, Keith Gibson, Mr. Gibson, one day just gave me a recording. He said, listen to this. And it was Strange Fruit, and Ella and Sarah Vaughan, all these singers, I was like, wow, that's really cool. He said, go to the library and check out all these records. So I go and get all all those old Decca records with Billie Holiday, it just was wow, that's so cool. I felt really weird, sitting there listening to this old music, but it was just something about it that was just so captivating, just so beautiful, and so just their voices, it's astonishing.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Ella. I mean, you just can't, you can't beat it, right? I mean, it's just the purity, the intonation. I mean, the way she can do interval jumps, it's just insane, right? Where does that come from, right? Because she didn't have any formal training, and we're all like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, so genius.
And I would imagine that did some of this influence you just as a player, how you try to produce sound? I mean, is there anything about listening to singers?
Yeah, no, for sure. You're always told as an instrumentalist to try to sing, but until you get to a certain level of proficiency, it doesn't really click, until you can really hear it in other players. And that's what is one of the most one of the greatest things for me of being in the CSO is you hear so many incredible musicians, you're inspired by so many people on a regular basis. My former colleague Chris Martin, when he was here, just how he would just sing. I mean, just and Dave McGill, who was a former principal bassoonist, just such an incredible player. He sometimes just knocks you off your chair, just how beautiful these people play. So, but then it does take a while for you to realize what you need to do to get to that level of being able to sing on your instrument. You might sound okay, but you just have the freedom. So the way you're just thinking and then able to play is actually what you're thinking. You know what I mean? You might think you're doing something, but then after a while, it just takes some time. Some people have it naturally. Yeah. Some people, you mentioned this, Ella, perhaps. Right. But for me, it took time to really understand it and work on it and develop it.
Right. Yeah. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's turn to. I'd love to talk about auditions and this whole discussion of diversity in orchestras, because as you know, this can be kind of a controversial subject, especially certainly within major symphonies. I mean, and this all sort of trickles down through regional orchestras and community orchestras as well. But I was reviewing for this episode, this article that came out in the New York Times back last summer. It's called "To Make Orchestras More Diverse, End Blind Auditions." Do you know this article?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask your thoughts on this, because it's clear that what blind auditions, who benefited the most from blind auditions was women. I mean, there's no doubt. And we in the Marine Band do blind auditions as well. They even put a carpet down so that you can't hear heels. And it's only at the finals in certain instruments that you might actually need people to sit in on ensembles. So at a certain point, and you kind of figure that, we sort of bank on the idea that when you get to that level in the finals and you're sort of splitting those hairs, it's not about gender or race or any of those things. You're genuinely really getting to the core of these people's playings. But in terms of the sort of weed out process, you want to make it as fair as possible. But this article acknowledges that women were benefited particularly. I think the New York Philharmonic is actually 50-50 now, women and men. Okay. And I think Boston is at 40%, something like that. So obviously huge strides were made from a gender perspective. But race is still a really big challenge with these orchestras. And I sort of took issue with the article in saying that the fact that a quarter of the city of New York is, because they were specific to the New York Philharmonic, obviously, the fact that the quarter of the city is people of color, that somehow the orchestra that represents the city should also represent those percentages. Right. So I was going to leave it with that and just ask you what your thoughts are in general of all of this, what you think of blind auditions and the diversity in orchestras today.
Yeah, so you mentioned the auditions, right? The process, and you mentioned the fact that one component of it are the auditioners, right? But there's also the committee. What's the makeup of the committee? What is the repertoire that's being asked to perform? How is the audition being run? What is the position that's being auditioned for? There's so many different factors. So I think that at least in the CSO and other orchestras I've been in, the committee is made up of at least 9 people. Right? Where back in the day, it was like we were talking about earlier. It was like you just went into the music director's office and you played a few minutes, and then. So now it's a lot more fair situation where you have to have a majority vote. And in the CSO too, we have a blind audition up until the finals for every round until you get to the semifinals and the finals. But in my experience of being in the CSO, of being in the St. Louis Symphony for 2 years, having taught at DePaul University here for 12 years, and also Roosevelt University for 5 years, I've only had one African-American student in all those 17 years of teaching. And as a committee member for auditions, I haven't seen one person of color in the finals in almost 20 years of being in the CSO. So the numbers aren't there. So I think that is probably the most important subject to address, is how do you increase the number of participants? How do you get so that there is an actual people to hire? And then you also have to remember that it's not just being offered the job. You have to get through the tenure process too, because at least in the CSO, you're offered the job, but there's a probationary period for 2 years, and you have to make sure you really fit in. So yeah, I don't know how beneficial it would be to orchestras or even the players auditioning to just not have a screen at all. I think in a lot of ways, it keeps, one of the biggest factors is actually people on the committee having students that they recognize or other colleagues that they recognize, right. Not necessarily the race of the person playing, although that is a factor, of course, and not just for racism, but also for just bias, affinity bias, or unconscious bias. It's just sometimes we don't realize what it is, but I think it's good to keep the screen up at least until the final round, for both sides of it, for the committee and also for the participants.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the bias, because I know, for example, in Cleveland, the concertmaster they had for many years was teaching so many people on violin, just as an example, that he could actually tell the sound of the player even with the screen up. I mean, he knew exactly who was playing, and on some level, you can't fault that, because if you're looking for a certain sound in a blend, then there it is. But
Yes.
he didn't have to see the person to know exactly who was playing and who it's like, which is like kind of a remarkable thing, right? I mean, it makes me think when I was at Northwestern and we had Robert Marcellus, the great legendary clarinetist, and he was blind by the end of his life.
Oh wow.
And he would sit in the back, and I mean, if anybody who played clarinet in the world studied with him, that was the big thing, right? Wow. If you studied with Marcellus, and he would sit in the back, and I would go to master classes and sit in there because it was legendary. He just seemed like, okay, and then he'd tell you what you were doing wrong, like that you were leaning this way, and that you were, he was saying things that you couldn't possibly know without looking at it, but that's how good his ear was. That kind of thing. So that's kind of fascinating. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you hit the nail on the head as far as I'm concerned with this article, because as far as like gender, the numbers are there. There's plenty of women that were auditioning. There was a bias against women for many years, and once they put the screen up and couldn't tell where the women were, the numbers were there. It was 50-50 probably, or roughly that, right, that were coming to these auditions. But as you point out, there just aren't people of color in the classical music world, specific to the orchestral world too. I mean, because these are all smaller and smaller factions of different areas. So I guess we were saying that it has to start younger. Yeah. We have to really start inspiring maybe students of color earlier on, like you were inspired by your dad with the classical music in the home.
Exposure. Yeah. And Will, we were talking a little bit before we went live just about your experience teaching in schools, and just what are your thoughts about your students?
Oh my goodness. Thank you. When we spoke before, the first thing that came to mind was the level of exposure. And I, as an elementary teacher, it's like the weight that I have upon me as an elementary music teacher to make sure I don't mess up. I don't mess up music for my kids is so important to me, that every decision I make, every intentional decision to program certain music, to plan certain music history endeavors is huge. And this month, February, has basically become, it feels like the most important month of the year for music teachers around the country, I think, because we all know how important it is to celebrate African-American lives and music. And there's so much to celebrate. There's so many ways to celebrate it. So yeah, I take the month of February really seriously. A lot of my colleagues too. And it's really exciting to see lesson plans that are being that are shared out there amongst other elementary teachers, and how we're all exposing kids. But it feels like it needs to be beyond February. It feels like it needs to be, and the good thing is that every month has different cultural celebrations we can identify with. But certainly, I love the feeling that I have that power. Just simple exposure can change one kid's perspective. And your story of Sibelius is resonating with me deeply. Just a powerful piece of music and an amazing recording can have an effect on a young person in a big way. I mean, it makes me feel, I feel it when I teach kids in elementary music. It's really serious because I can have that effect early on, and also the negative effect if I'm not taking the chance to be diverse and show them different voices. I was showing them Ella Fitzgerald just last week on the one note samba, and I didn't know this song, but Ella Fitzgerald has one of the best senses of rhythm I've ever heard. I mean, she's scatting for 6 minutes straight, and it is lightning fast, and it is one of the crispest, cleanest, most like internalized sense of rhythms I've ever heard in my life. And that's just rhythm coming from a singer.
Wow.
And I mean, you put an instrument in her hand and she could fly, but I mean, her instrument was her voice. But I mean, it reignited a new way to explore Ella Fitzgerald, not just her phrasing, but her precise ability to be on the rhythm or stretch the rhythm. It was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for asking, for sure.
Oh no, for sure. And I think that one of the most important things is like, at least with kids and classical music, is to make sure that they're aware of the great composers and the great works. Like you mentioned rhythm. Like I was just thinking about Beethoven's Fourth Symphony. You know how it starts just with rhythm.
Yeah.
Like how cool it is to like analyze like what he wrote there and how it's performed, and just like in the context of the rhythm, you know. And it'd be cool to like do something where you take a piece like that, where you take one note samba and just, okay, kids, we're going to talk about rhythm, you know, and in these different contexts, these different great artists and great pieces of work. And then you give them a recording and go home, and you know they have like a mixtape of, you don't do tapes anymore, right? Like I don't know what you do now.
Tage, are you saying you want to transition from the CSO? Are you looking to get your elementary certification?
Something.
We can make this happen.
This is easy.
Think about stuff like that. I mean, honestly, but yeah. So I mean, just something like that would be so super cool to introduce to kids, and you know, maybe I don't know, maybe one kid out of 50 will have it really resonate in the sense that they want to make them pursue it as a lifelong career. But at least you reach that one person, you know.
Oh, I feel it every day teaching, and in this virtual world, it's been really reaching kids has been a real challenge, but I am really excited about this month. I have a lot of fun things planned, and I'm just really excited. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I do it.
So Tage, it looks like you've been reaching people, because we have a viewer. Her name is Anna Marie Diaz, who says, I believe Tage went to New England music camp when he was younger.
I did.
This is her talking. I went to New England music camp the summer of 09 and 10, and Tage visited as an alumni and gave a master class in performance.
That's true. Oh yeah. Oh hey, Mrs. Diaz. We're like NEMC buddies. It's such a cool place, the New England Music. It's the New England Music Camp. It's up in Bangor, Maine, about I don't know 3.5 hours from Boston. And I went there every summer in high school for 8 weeks. My parents would just drop me off and go, and it was sort of like a music / rec camp. So it wasn't like Interlochen or Tanglewood. It was, you know, kind of split 50-50. But it was really cool.
I was just going to mention Interlochen because, you know, when you talk about Sibelius, for those of us that went to Interlochen, it's, you know, Liszt's Les Preludes, which is the big finale they do every summer there. And, you know, it's this, you know, great tone poem. And it just elicits so much emotion, especially after 8 weeks of, you know, making friends. And then they have every orchestra put together and they do this. It's insane. They use like 5 different conductors spread out and they're like playing this thing. It's insane, right? So, but to this day, you know, the Pavlovian effect that piece has on me is just ridiculous. You know? So let me ask about the Sibelius. When you first did that, I have to imagine you've played it in the CSO by now. Did you lose your mind when you got to play with CSO, like with all these memories that came back? Or?
Oh, for anytime we play that piece. Yeah. Oh, for sure. You just go into a different place, you know.
That's great.
Really cool.
So have you, we had another person asking if you know, and this is kind of a delicate subject, but I feel like we can go here because, you know, you're cool and this is cool and it's Black History Month, right? So we want to be celebrating things too, but I also don't want to ignore, you know, some of the challenges that you may or may not have faced. Have you experienced racism, or do you know others who experienced racism within the classical world? For whatever reason. I mean, it could be a whole bunch of things, right?
I think I wouldn't be wrong if I said that probably every person of color who's in the classical symphony world, classical music world, has faced some sort of racism, some sort of obstacle. I don't like to focus on that stuff. I don't, you know, there was one incident that I thought was really cool. I auditioned for the New York Philharmonic back in 1995 before I joined the band. I didn't get anywhere, and not even past the first round. But I got a call from the personnel manager a couple of days later who said that the Philharmonic had a policy, whereas if you were a black musician, you could come and automatically be advanced to the finals. And
Wow.
I thought that's interesting. I didn't want to do that. I thought I didn't want to, it feels like cheating, like that feels kind of weird. But I asked him if I could come and just sit in back, of the hall, just and watch it and participate and just watch how it went on. And that was like the greatest experience. That was like that was just like, because I realized I'm not there. I'm not ready. These guys are amazing. But I also realized it wasn't impossible. I'm like, okay, they're great, but they're human. It's not like,
Yeah.
This superhero.
Oh man, I'm glad I asked that question. That's a great story. That's a fantastic story. Wow.
Yes, that really just like totally inspired me to like, okay, this is what I need to do, like to get to a level where I'm competing. Yeah, it was really cool.
And there you are, man. Chicago Symphony, man. I mean,
yeah.
It's awesome.
Anna Marie followed up her comment about New England, and she said that one of the things you told her was that you practiced 8 hours a day, and as a young person, she said it blew her.
Yeah.
She thought you were absolutely crazy.
Yeah, no, you have to be. Like, seriously, Anna Marie, like that experience with the New York Philharmonic was like, okay, this is what I need to do. This, and this. It's going to take this much time. Really, it's going to take this much time. And Pete, when I was in the band, that's what I would do. I would just sit like a day, whatever we had to call in. Okay, we don't have to go anywhere. But anyway, so I have all day. All right, 8 to 10, take a break. 1 to 3, take a break. 4 to 5, take a break. And I remember someone telling me you should also play every day of the year for a whole year. And that's harder than it sounds. I mean, sometimes you're traveling, sometimes you're sick. But I remember doing that, like playing, maybe some days was only 5 minutes, but making sure I played the horn every day for a year.
Well, I tell students that just from the perspective of, some kids will practice a whole bunch on one day, and then they'll take a day off and they'll practice a whole bunch on the next day, or they'll take 2 days off and then, practice a lot before their lesson. And I say to them, if you actually practice less, but a little bit every day, you'll find yourself improving way more rapidly, right? Because not just arbitrary, but it's muscle memory.
That's right.
It's all of that muscle memory. And it's like, it'd be great if you practiced a lot each day, but if you can only practice 15 minutes every day versus an hour every other day, it's going to, be way more effective.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I don't know how you did that though. I mean, because we as string players are kind of notorious for 5-6 hours a day. I've done 8 hours a day, but as a brass player, I would think, isn't that, can't you do some damage after a point?
You gotta be careful. I mean, you can't go, full Maynard Ferguson, but you certainly can practice your soft, delicate stuff.
Yeah.
Practice your phrasing. Okay. You have to.
Okay.
I mean, you have to. Your articulation, stand in the corner with the light off and just go for 20 minutes.
Well, and that's an important point, is that practicing doesn't necessarily mean always blowing into your horn.
Actually, I have a question. One of our brass players from the Philharmonic, Alex, is a trombone player, and he asked a question that had to do with buzzing, actually. And he was asking, as a teacher, do you use buzzing as a technique with your students? And because it feels like mouthpiece buzzing is in a place right now where some teachers are for, and then there's some other teachers in the brass world who are sort of phasing it out. But he wondered where you were on that and how you feel buzzing has affected your playing, or if it's something that you focus on with your students at all.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's such a good question, because when I was younger, as a student, especially in college, I buzzed all the time. I had like a 45-minute buzzing routine that I would do every day.
And that's where a lot of our endurance can sometimes get burned up, or you can build it up if you do it the right way.
That's so true. But I think it really depends on the student and where they are at a certain point in their development. Some people really need that. They really need to just sit there and just really get their sound focused, get their chops really focused, and that can be very helpful. For others, if doing too much might just, it won't be as helpful, even to a detriment.
Yeah.
But it just kind of depends. But yeah, but to your point, there's some scholar teachers that really advocate it, and I don't do so much buzzing anymore. But yeah, just like with anything, you just have to find that balance and be smart about it and understand ultimately what it is you're trying to achieve. If you don't have, you have to make sure your goals are super crystal clear. Like you have to have a sound you want in mind. You have to figure out like where you want to be as far as if you're auditioning for something, if you have the repertoire covered. If you're spending too much time on buzzing, you can't get to your transposition. You can't get to your, other stuff that you need to be focused on to be successful.
Yep.
So, so Tage, with with it being Black History Month, and
Me being black.
Well, everything black. Yeah, here we go. And I'm in black. See, I'm playing the role here. No, but Will and I have been talking a lot about Black American composers, of the classical tradition, and obviously there has been in recent years a more of an awareness of people like William Grant Still, who was considered the dean of Afro-American composers. You've got George Walker, who I think he was the first Pulitzer Prize winning African American. Of course, Florence Price, and there are many others. I'm just curious if the CSO has gotten jumped on that bandwagon, and if you have any personal favorites in any of those, or any other composers that you can think of.
Yeah, I know Maestro Muti made it a point to schedule a few African American composers before COVID hit. So we did a piece by Mrs. Price. I don't know that we did anything by William Grant Still. I can't. I don't know if I have a favorite, but I think any exposure to it, any awareness of it, and just programming it is fantastic. But I have to maintain, like, as much as we do stuff that's fantastic in outreach, if we lose the core of what we're about, the Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, I just John Williams is great. Star Wars scores are great. I love doing E.T. That's fantastic. Home Alone is so fantastic. But geez, I mean, let's. I don't know. I'd much rather play a Beethoven sixth and have our audiences hear a nice Beethoven sixth.
That's great to hear too. So let's talk about conductors too, because when I was in high school, I was in the first National High School Honors Orchestra, and it was out in Anaheim, 1986. It was like we were total guinea pigs. They picked everybody from every state, and I represented West Virginia. And James DePriest was the conductor.
Awesome.
And in thinking, because I was sitting here thinking about Black composers, Black musicians, Black conductors, and all of this, because obviously we're conductors here, so we're kind of keeping that focus in a way. And I was thinking back on that time, and I can honestly say there was never a moment when I sat in the orchestra and he came on the podium and I went, oh my gosh, he's Black. Like, it didn't even occur to me, right? And I mean, that's a good thing, obviously, but I came to learn later that, I mean, trailblazer, right? I mean, because I mean, I think in some sense, I suppose that's a good thing, in that I wasn't somehow led to believe that conductors could only be white or something like that, even though obviously up to that point, I can't imagine I had seen any other Black conductor, but there he was. Now of course he was also in a wheelchair, and I mean, we were kind of focused on that too, because I think he had polio as a young boy. But I'm thinking of Michael Morgan, right?
Yep.
Did he come back to Chicago?
Sure.
From time to time, or
I've never met him. He might, but I don't really know him at all. Yeah. No, there are some really some great African American conductors too out there. We had gosh, I'm so embarrassed, I'm forgetting his name, an assistant conductor of the CSO for a number of years, who was brought on by Schulte, I think, or even I think it was Schulte or Barenboim.
That wasn't Michael Morgan?
No, I'm drawing a blank right now. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. But no, but yeah, there are a number of really successful African American conductors as well.
Okay, So, but we have just a little bit of time left. Last question I want to ask you.
Wait, I thought you had to make another. I thought it was two. Don't you have to make another one?
Oh, I think that was my limit. I think that we
So
should.
Peter is only allowed to drink 2.
I'm only allowed
in 1 hour.
This has been such an amazing conversation that I haven't.
You didn't even finish your first one.
The need to finish even the first one here. Although I will say that the Immortal Beloved, which again we want to thank Sophia Kim for inventing this drink, has so many ingredients that it's just not that easy to put together, right? I can't be knocking them out, right? If I was making a margarita, I can make 3 or 4 or 5, and that's the problem, right? So there you go. We want to thank our vice president, who is all the behind the scenes, Jen Myers, for helping us put all of this together. But the last question I want to ask you, to kind of bringing this back around to sort of orchestral playing, and for us as conductors, I always love to ask members, of a major symphony, what is it that you want? I know this is a big kind of a overreaching question, perhaps, but what is it that you like or want from a conductor, or don't like? What are your needs as a player? What are you looking for? Beyond just sort of being inspired.
Well, I can say, with our music director, Meister Muti, it's like his repertoire and his interpretations is so unbelievably inspiring all the time. It's so different from Barenboim, who was also a genius. But I say that the common thing that these music directors have in common is their repertoire choices and their total commitment to their vision and their their genius and insistence upon reaching that vision. Just doing what it takes to get there. That's probably one of the at least with like a Muti or Barenboim, Haitink, Boulez, when you get to that level, that's like probably the most inspiring thing for me is like the past few years when we've done like either the Verdi Requiem or Puccini, the real Italian works with Muti. It's just like that's his wheelhouse, and it's just like holy moly,
Yeah, I was thinking. I was talking to. I came out. I think if it was for a Midwest band and orchestra clinic, I was out there with Aaron. Remember Aaron Flynn, my buddy?
Oh wow.
He's also a composer, by the way, an awesome black composer. Oh yeah,
wow.
No, he's doing more and more of that, which is fantastic. As he's finishing out his time in the band. He's got another couple of years, but he and I were out in Chicago for the clinic, and I went to dinner with Blair Milton, my former teacher with Northwestern. So please tell him I said hello. You have to say hello for me.
Okay, I will.
And I sat down with Blair, and Blair is so old school, right? He studied with Gingdold at Indiana, and he was in the St. Louis Symphony first.
Oh yeah.
In like 74, 75, and then he joined the CSO in 76. He's been there since, right? I think he's retiring soon. But he's so old school that I know that if I ask him I would sit down and ask him about conductors, and he would, I knew he was just gonna like just burst my bubble on every one of them, right? I would say, what was it like playing under Carlos Kleiber, like one of my idols, right? And he was like, well, he had everything in his hands, and he had the vision. He knew everything that he wanted, but he said he could show you anything. And yet he still felt the need to micromanage and tell you how to play every single note in every measure. Oh, so he said by the time you got to the concert, you didn't even have to look at him because you already knew how to play the piece the way he wanted you to play it. Wow. So that was sort of troubling to me. It's ironic because he was so clear with how he could shape his hands and get what he wanted, and yet to find out that he was stopping in the rehearsal and really dictating, right? I think Cella Badaki was similar. He required 7 rehearsals rather than your normal 3 or whatever. If you guys, right? So they wouldn't have these guys back very often because they'd have to pay so much to have them come in, right? But I asked him one day. I knew that he would kind of give me that sort of typical kind of cynical, orchestral. He's been there forever, and impress me. Like he loved Schulte, right? Makes sense. But one day when I finally asked him about Dudamel. Now, this is many years ago, before Dudamel made it to LA. Okay. I said, have you played under I think maybe he came through Chicago at one point. Yeah. And you may have been there for this. Yeah. I'm sure you were. And I said, and I was sure he was going to say, oh, it's all hype. He's not that great, blah, 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 right? Put his fork down while he was eating. And he just looked at me and he said, Peter, he had us in the palm of his hand in 30 seconds.
Wow.
This was the 26-year-old Dudamel.
Wow.
He said everything you just said. He said he had a vision. Of course, he had the score memorized. He knew exactly how he wanted to hear this. And it was a partnership. And then he just, and of course, the energy, right? I could not believe I was hearing this from my teacher because I was like, oh, this guy, it's just a
young
big
kid. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Tage Larsen, it has been so great to have you here. It's so great to see you again after all these years. I hope we can see each other in person post-COVID.
Yes, sir.
And thank you, Will, for being here. Will, why don't you take us out with our sponsors again? And
and of course, if anyone is able to consider a donation at this time, you can also go to the Richmond Philharmonic website, or I believe Jen, our amazing coordinator of all things, is posted a button for you to donate as well. But thanks again to all of our amazing supporters: Vogue Flowers, Town Bank, Virginia Department of Veteran Services, Virginia Museum of History and Culture. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tage. Again, it's a real honor to have you here. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much for asking.
Yeah.
So thanks everybody for tuning in to our episode 8 here of Cocktails with Conductors, Black Lives in Music. Our guest has been Tage Larsen of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, trumpet player there. Fantastic musician. So great to see you, buddy. And we hope to see everyone in 2 weeks from tonight on episode 9 of Cocktails with Conductors. And please tell everybody about these episodes. We put them up on YouTube, on the Richmond Philharmonic YouTube channel. You can watch all the past episodes up to this point, and we hope to see you soon. Okay? Take care, everybody. Happy Black Lives Month. We'll see you soon.